We're ready to get started. It's Friday afternoon. You have 2 more hours. We're so close. We're doing a panel on customer experience and customer loyalty. And I've got this great group of gentlemen here who are going to share their insights and expertise with you on all the things that they've learned in their franchise business. But first, I'll have them introduce themselves. Scott.
Aloha, everybody. Scott Snyder with Badass Coffee of Hawaii.
Swergen. Neil Perek with Made This Franchise.
Brian Beers, Prendling Group. We own a portfolio of franchises, and I'm also a franchise broker.
And I'm Ben Fox, and I'm with 5 Star Franchising. We are a platform company in the home services industry.
All right, you guys ready?
Let's hit it.
Are you guys ready? These rooms are just going to keep getting smaller and smaller. All right, what role does customer experience play in differentiating your franchise from competitors in today's crowded market? You want to start with that, Scott?
Sure. So, Badass Coffee of Hawaii, some of my fellow panelists up here, we've got a little bit different in that we've actually got retail stores, and so you're going to hear kind of that customer service experience from multiple angles. With Badass Coffee, the coffee industry is so competitive, right? And a lot of it is a Me Too sort of experience. And so customer service isn't just the interaction for Badass Coffee of Hawaii, it's about the culture. It's about the full 360 experience that you have. That is the customer experience, right? So, and it is emphasized by the experience and the interaction that they have with our staff, with our teams, with the franchisees. I think one of the things in our space specifically, and where customer experience is so differentiating, is when you have so many choices of places to go for coffee, and what drives you to pick one coffee brand over another, could be the coffee. It could be convenience, it could be location, it could be the people that you like, that they know your name. It's like Cheers, right? Everybody knows your name, they know your drink. But for Badass Coffee, we really believe we have the best coffee in the industry. But that's not enough, right? It's got to be more than that, right? You've got to feel like the whole experience rewarded you for coming in that day. And so that differentiator, customer experience, both the interaction as well as the colors and the artwork and the music and the sights and the smells and the merchandise and all those little hints about Hawaii takes you to a place that, if you've been to Hawaii before, it's a place that you know and love, and it's an escape back to a place that you love. If you've never been to Hawaii, it's what you imagine it to be. So that customer experience, again, is 360. What differentiates us. Our coffee is amazing, but it's not good enough. You have to have more. You have to have enough for that consumer to make a choice. We're the ultimate habit industry, right? I got to break your habit by having you come multiple times before you give up one of those other brands. So every experience has to be consistent. Every experience has to be amazing. Every experience has to be something that brings you back. So that's what differentiates Badass Coffee.
That's awesome. And we'll ask Ben.
Yeah, so
same question.
The question is how important or how does customer experience help you differentiate your brand? And if any of you have worked in the home, or if any of you ever tried to hire a painter or a home service professional, it's pretty easy to differentiate yourself in that you just need to be answering the phone, right? You just need to be available. You need to be accessible. And so that is one of the things that we focus really heavily on at 5 Star Franchising. We're in the home services space. We have a number of brands. They don't all have consistency in their customer or in who they're targeting, but the focus is the same, that we want that initial impression to be good. We want to differentiate ourselves from our competition. So we're accessible and we want to have ease of access. As you go through the customer journey, there's other touch points that are incredibly important, from how the franchisee interacts with them in the home, the technician. So there's franchisee training. There's a lot of coaching, there's a lot of software that goes into those touch points. And then the follow-up, after the service is done, after the installation is done, we want to continue to nurture that relationship, get them to refer us, get them to give us recommendations on social media, on our Google business profile. All of that is a virtuous cycle. If we win with the first impression and then carry it all the way through, it continues to feed the machine and add more leads and that sort of thing. So we leverage a number of things. We've invested in a lot of different platforms, as well as our own internal call center and our own internal marketing agency to perfect this. And it's challenging and it's moving, as we'll talk about in this panel. Things are shifting really rapidly with customer experience today, but it's a really, really important point for us as we try to differentiate our brands in a very crowded space in home services.
Do you have an example of any time that you've exceeded customer expectations?
Yeah. So I think this is best done at the franchisee level, right? When they're having that one-on-one relationship with the homeowner. For example, we have a brand called Gotcha Covered, which is in the windows, blinds, shades, draperies business. That's a fairly crowded space. There's several franchise concepts in there, and then you're also competing against online ordering of people do it themselves. And so the way we differentiate ourselves in the market is by being consultative, expertise, design, helping the homeowner create their wonderful, create their wow inside their home. And so the way that we do this is by training franchisees to go above and beyond. For example, and it's not like it's unique to us, it's not like something we created ourselves, but after the close, after the installation is done, a fruit basket comes to the door, right? From the franchisee, thanking them for their business, thanking them for supporting them. So little things like that the franchisee executes on is how you wow the customer. It's all about wowing the customer.
Brian, do you have any examples of wowing the customer or creating a remarkable experience? From
Yeah,
the
so
automotive
we're in the
side?
auto repair business primarily. So we have over 30 Midas franchises. And so, in the auto repair business, I mean, we all fix the same cars, we buy the same parts, we pretty much hire the same techs. What differentiates it is trust, right? For anybody who owns a car, right, you go to the place that you trust. And so for us, we look at, it's loyalty of customers. We have really good reporting around that. And I think a lot of it is for us is tracking the loyalty and the retention. I don't have a specific one, but I know it's a number we track, and our best managers are the ones that really create that trust. And people come in and they know them. If I'm in a store and the customer comes in and they know their name, there's clearly a relationship. They bring them cards, they bring them cookies. We see that a lot. We have Slack, and sort of our managers will post onto Slack to say, hey, look what we got from these customers, and it's always a great sign when they're coming to and they're coming to get their cars fixed, bringing some sort of treat. That's a good sign for us.
One thing I would add on this is we're pretty data obsessive, and we're getting more so, right? Data. Let's talk facts, not feelings. And CX and wowing the customer, delighting the customer is somewhat of a feeling game. But where we have gone with this is NPS, right? Consumer NPS is kind of that grade of how the franchisee in their local market is doing. And so having a very, first of all, even knowing where you are, having a benchmark, and then continuously moving up in that is how we would go at this with data.
All right, Neil, what strategies have you implemented to foster long-term relationships with your customers?
To foster long-term relationships. So, has anyone seen The Wire? Have you seen The Wire? It's like a street crime show with drug dealers, and I feel like drug dealers know more about business than 90% of MBAs. But anyways, in the show, the drug dealers give drugs to the people and get them kind of hooked, and after a certain amount of time, they're customers of theirs. I'm not advocating selling crack, but what we realized is if we get a customer really really in the habit of using us during the first like 3 cleanings, it fosters a very long-term relationship with the customer. So everything we do is focused on the first impression. It's really freaking hard to dig out of a bad first impression. So if you set the first 3 cleanings for us, and we found that there's like a 43% of customers cancel within the first 3 cleanings, we're in home services. If we get them past that, it's going to be a long-term relationship. And if we don't, then that's kind of where they fail. So for a lot of our franchisees, that's the KPI, is have they got past the first 3 cleanings or not? And franchisees might not even know why we're pushing for that KPI, but we know because we got the data. So typically it's just front-loading the customer service, and that keeps them loyal for a very long time.
What do you think are the most critical touch points in the customer journey?
So for us, it's going to be a lot of the personalization post first cleaning. Home service is very different from other industries where maybe it's stores and things like that. For us, it's really staying in front of the customer. As long as they're happy, they don't cancel. But if something happens, then they're going to cancel. So usually after the first cleaning for us, we'll say, hey, did you like the cleaner? Was there anything wrong? Do you want us to change out the person? After that, hopefully they stay in a recurring program. Now the trick is, a lot of customers are not on a recurring program. This is home services. So how do you keep hitting them over and over and over? So for us, it's after 1 month, we send an automated email. We have 2 or 3 newsletters per month that go out to them. We usually hit them after 6 months saying, hey, your home is probably messy, your wife's mad, why don't you book with us? And the key point for franchisees is they're not going to do this, right? So you just centralize everything and you automate the text blast, email blast for franchisees for them. So it's pretty cheap to centralize it and just do it for franchisees, and that's what we do.
That's great. Brian, how do you measure customer satisfaction and loyalty?
Yeah, so there's 2. So NPS, Net Promoter Score, is one that they do at like a corporate level that we participate in. The other is Google. So we're pretty. We did a 180 kind of on this for years ago. I didn't see a direct correlation with Google reviews to revenue. And when we looked at some of the top performing locations in the country, they didn't have great Google scores. And part of it was like they're so busy, right, that like sometimes people aren't happy because things take longer than they expect and whatever, all these things. But then, I don't know, we changed our belief on it. It's been a big focus. And so now we drive our guys. We had over 200 reviews a week between all of our stores. So we're tracking for over 10,000 this year. And we have now people coming in specifically mentioning, hey, I came here because these great reviews that I heard online. And so that has been a big change for us. And then now it's NPS. But the problem is like, part of the problem is from the customer standpoint. It's like, we want them to get the Google review at the site, and then we want to send them an email, and then we have like a million questions for them, and then they get like a phone call, and then they get another email, and it's like you start to bombard people with like all this feedback. And so I don't know, that's the thing I'm always cautious of, is making sure we stay like, let's just try to get like one solid piece of feedback, not we hit them 20 different times, because then we're starting to get negative stuff because they're going to be like, stop bothering me. One of the other questions you had too was about strategies to track long-term relationships and how do we get people coming back for more. So we have found, at least in our business, that if we can get a customer on a payment plan, so some sort of financing, that those customers, they visit us twice as often, and when they come back, they spend twice as much. And so it's a big focus for us in both automotive, and then we have a home service franchise as well, to get people on any sort of payment plan, whether that's a company branded credit card, whether it's like a third party financing, like a WiseTac or whatever financing program, because a lot of times it's large unexpected expenses. Most people don't have the money saved up, and most other companies just don't offer these payment plans. Even though they have them, they don't utilize them. And so we come in, we say, hey, listen, you don't pay us anything today. You can spread it over whatever 3, 6, 12 months, no interest. And a lot of times, there's a relief to that because there's like a money issue, especially with inflation, and it costs more. But they don't want to come out and say that, so they decline it for other reasons. And so it's a huge focus on us. I mean, in the auto repair business, it's over 30% of our sales. But then we find, because we track all this, that those customers are way more loyal. They come back twice as often, and when they do, they spend twice as much. So anyway, it's a big focus for us. I know a lot of companies don't focus on, and even in home services, it's a big push, and we're making, and it works. So
That's great. Let's talk about delighting customers. So Ben, what unique or innovative approaches has your franchise adopted to delight customers beyond the standard service expectations?
Yeah, I mentioned Gotcha Coverage example where franchisees go above and beyond. I still feel like this is a training and coaching path of doing this. There's, technology centrally that you can implement that make you stand out, but it's almost like expectation these days. Amazon, Google, they have changed the game. They have a lot of funds to implement things that the customer is now expecting. So it's the personal touch. I'm repeating myself, but it's the personal touch either by the franchisee or the technician in the home with the homeowner. In the cleaning business, right? Our call center company called ProNexus works with about 65 different brands across the home services industry. I've actually worked in the cleaning business for quite a while just with that business. And the above and beyond for that business is about in the home technician cleaning something that they normally don't do. It's not a part of the offering. We have a mosquito brand that Five Star Franchising has in the platform. And it's about that technician touching base with the homeowner after they've served the home and making sure that everything's going on, doing it well. And that is very, very difficult to do at scale. It requires a lot of coaching, a lot of training. And so culturally, it has to be a part of what you're trying to do at the brand. You have to eat, sleep, and breathe it, the customer service component of it, for it to get all the way down to the technician.
That's good. Scott, we haven't talked to you in a while. How do you ensure a consistent and exceptional customer experience across all your locations, especially as you scale?
Good question. For a little history on our brand, Badass Coffee of Hawaii, this brand actually started in 1989, started franchising in 1995, and I was brought in 2017 because they were about 18 months from going under. The franchises that we acquired as part of the acquisition of assets, we had basically 18 different stores that had a completely different interpretation of what the brand was, what the customer experience was. So I'm a really big believer in the alignment of brand alignment with customer service. I think you need to know who you are, and you need to be crystal clear in that. Spend the time, get them involved. One of the very first things we did was, having that brand alignment workshop, and we had franchisees, we had staff, we had suppliers, we had all these different folks that were involved that all had a different perspective of what this brand is. Why is that important? It's incredibly important because it becomes the roadmap for what are you going to train to, right? You can't hold someone accountable for a standard if they don't know what the standard is. They don't know what it looks like, right? So our approach is all about, education. First, alignment on what the brand is, know who you are, and then go back and train to that. Educate, what does that look like? If the brand walked up to you today and a customer experience, what does that brand look like? What do they sound like? How would they dress? Are they funny? Are they dry? Are they witty? Are they empathetic? Like, what is the customer experience? So we educate first, train to that second, model it, right? And the key to modeling is if you believe in that, and that's your standard, and you're the franchisee, or you're a franchisor and you're looking for your next franchisee, you're looking for those same traits in your employees, in your franchisees, because they need to be able to model that for your customers. And then finally, be able to reinforce that. I'm a big believer that the customer experience, you're only as good as your last transaction. So the way that you scale this is to be consistent. And if you do all that work as a brand to get your brand DNA dialed in, you got the right product, you got all the packaging right, you got all the brand promises of what that customer experience is going to be, and it falls short, all that time and effort, you're actually spending money, time and effort and resources to tell someone, it was okay, which is as good as 10 negative referrals to use your brand. So you're only as good as your last transaction. So you've got to educate, you got to train, you got to model it, and then reinforce that.
All right, Ben, how is technology playing a role in improving customer experiences within your franchise?
Yeah, so I watched an interview of Jeff Bezos back when he was actually the CEO of Amazon, and he said a couple things that may or may not be relevant here, but one of them was like he expects his executive team to live 3 to 5 years in the future. They have to be thinking about the future. And he also said, which I thought was really profound, that his job is to make one decision a day that's right. The right decision, but only one of them, right? He's at that level that he has to, it all comes down to those little decisions that have a big effect on a large company. I think it's relevant to this conversation because if you're going to set your system up for scale, you need to be thinking 3 to 5 years out in the future. It is a lot easier to implement change, implement a process, a system in a franchise that has 10 units versus 100 units or 250 units. It's like, for example, 5-star franchising, we have made a number of acquisitions over the last 3 years and of varying sizes, and trying to implement a new CRM in a brand that has 250 locations is really hard compared to implementing a CRM that has 35 locations. We have both, and it's just gone a lot easier at 35. It's a lot less calories burned and spent doing that. For customer experience, I think doing some hard things that are set up for scale. For us in home services, that's a call center. It's not always popular with the franchise owner, but we just know from data and from a lot of experience that franchisees are going to miss the call. They're not going to respond to chat on the website. They're not going to respond to text. They're not going to call, text, and email and follow up over and over again of a lead that has sent in their information. They don't scale. Franchisees don't scale. Even their in-office people don't scale. They can't cover 24/7. There's a number of reasons why. Doing a call center early for us is a strategic, important decision so that the franchisee can focus on the most important things, which is out in their market, running their business, getting the things that they can only do while we can centralize some of those more tough CX components.
Brian, same question. How is technology playing a role in improving your customer satisfaction?
Yeah, so for us, it's rolling out digital vehicle inspection. So, technicians, mechanics using iPads, customers getting a text with pictures of here's your car, here are the recommendations, here are videos. And so we're just starting that process. And a lot of it just goes back to the trust and transparency and how do we just streamline as much as possible and show and tell. Show and tell is what sells. It's easier in some industries than others, but for us, that's the primary one.
Neil, with increasing customer demand for personalization, how are you striking the balance between efficiency and personalization at scale?
Yeah, so there's a couple points we advise franchisees to be super personal on and other stuff where we could just automate. I think a lot of people just try to automate everything for franchisees. You'll get those surveys of, hey, how did we do? And, happy face and stuff. And that doesn't really work. What we found that moves the needle the most for franchisees is pretty much two things. Customer follow-up. So did the customer actually like the service? Are they going to stay with the recurring plan or not? And Google reviews. So there's a direct correlation now more than ever with Google reviews and actually increased SEO and increased leads, especially with Google Gemini, all this AI stuff happening. That's pretty much where everything's going. And I found that when we try to automate Google reviews, like getting a company to automate texting customers, it just doesn't really work. But when franchisees ask for Google reviews and maybe you tie bonuses and things to it, the number of reviews shoot up drastically. So the main touch points that we keep personalized would be customer follow-up and Google reviews. Almost everything else, reminders, check-in calls, or reminders and things like that, we try to automate. Especially with the use of AI now, it's very easy to do so. We have chatbots everywhere. You can create custom GPTs on ChatGPT, stupidly easy now. Give that to franchisees, so it automates a lot of things on the back end for you already.
Great. Scott, same question?
I don't know that I have a lot to add to what Neil just said, because I think that's spot on, actually. The only thing I would add, just kind of touching on his last point, I think there are so many technologies out there that do the first 90%, right? Do the first 95%. I think where the personalization comes in, that part, the technology makes that efficient. I think where the personalization comes in is the last 5%, the way that you execute that. So we use personalization to initiate the interaction, right? but ultimately comes down to, again, it comes down to you're only as good as your last transaction. So if that wasn't recognized, if that loyalty rewards member wasn't asked in store if they are, and you gave them this wonderful acknowledgement, a mahalo for being part of our Ohana Rewards, and gosh, all these wonderful things are available to you today. The people behind are kind of doing one of these, right? Like, who's that guy, right? So it is how you execute it at the end, and I think that's where the efficiency of having the right offer strategy, the right technologies, to know what the buying habits are, being able to put that together in something seamless that drives traffic, but the personalization is recognizing that person and then kicking in the actual experience in store. That's what makes a difference.
Brian, I'm curious from you as well, from being in the automotive space, anything additional or just kind of the same?
Yeah, I think, yes. I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah,
nothing to add there.
they're all pretty general. Yep. Okay, so these questions are for all of you. What trends do you see shaping the future of customer experience in franchising, and how is your brand preparing for them? Ben, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so everyone loves to talk about AI, or as I call it, Al. Was it Ryan? Did you tell me this joke? Somebody was up on the stage talking to a whole group about AI, and they were calling it Al. And when they're calling it Al, they are the expert in the room. Because you told the joke, I thought. It wasn't you. Anyway, everyone loves to talk about Al, and I think for us in CX, there is definitely a place to play for it to play in the experience. So we, in the call center business that we have, ProNexus, we are definitely building out our AI offering, and we see it as a complementary offering. I think there's always going to be a place for the human touch, the human element. There is a percentage, it may be shrinking, it may be staying the same, but there's a percentage of the consumer base that does want to talk to somebody. Currently, we're about 60% of our transactions, our appointments set, are via a voice call versus online booking, appointment setting via a widget or a chat or text. So there's still a large group that wants to talk on the phone. But with AI, we've seen it actually improve the text and chat. It's better than an agent. They talk so much more clearly. They say the right thing. They don't go off script. It's a better experience for the consumer. Now, there's still some things that need to be ironed out with it. There's still some things that need to be worked through, but I see it really enhancing the various touch points of the customer journey, if not replacing some things.
Brian?
Yeah, so for me, I think it all comes to AI. I guess this is how it's utilized. At the end of the day, we're in the people business, right? People buy from people they trust, and they, at least in ours, it's somewhat relationship based. And so, I view it not as, there's some of that, but I think for us, it's using it to how do we better train our salespeople, our managers, to be able to help customers, whether it's through overcoming objections or just conflict resolution, just more on the training side to get our people more up to speed and how to deal with situations. But at the end of the day, customers, satisfaction is always about, what they have an expectation in their mind of what it's going to be like, and did you meet or exceed that expectation? Like, I don't think none of that changes, and so I think it's more of how do we just get our guys and our team to better set customer expectations, and then better just make sure we meet them. And I think it's through training with tools of AIs, but it's still back to basics of people to people.
Neil?
So question was around customer service using tech.
Yeah, the future of customer experience in franchising, and how's
Yeah.
your brand preparing for it?
Yeah, I actually think brands are probably going to over-index on AI, and it's going to kick back the other way as most things go with new technologies. Obviously, there's a use of AI, and we use it drastically. Where I think it's the most useful is probably around lead capture, right? Like my niece, if you ask her, how do you search for anything? She goes to TikTok, It's like the second biggest search algorithm. I don't go on TikTok at all, but people go there to search. Now, if you're on all these channels and you're promoting your brands on all these channels, there's no way to manage that yourself. Even with a team, there's no way to capture all those leads. With AI tools, you can capture that and centralize it. I think that's the best use of AI for brands. It's going to be lead capture. When it comes to using AI in your business for customer service, I like to think about it as combining offshore talent with the use of AI to enhance what they're doing. You can use like AI receptionists and all these random things which are popping up. I've never seen one which is actually good, but what I use AI a lot for is all of our staff is offshores in 8 different countries for my local location. I train them on how to use AI to enhance what they're doing to make it a better customer experience for the customer. Customers still want to talk to people, right? That's where most sales happen. Even with the millennial crowd, we try to push everyone to call us because close rates are going to be a lot higher. So how do you make your offshore talent be way better to make a really good customer experience? Typically through the use of AI. So I don't think it's going to replace, it's just going to enhance. But there's certain cases, especially around lead capture, where I think it could make a big, big difference.
I'm going to talk about Al as well, Ben. Slightly different twist on that. I think, again, in the retail store environment, I'd start with, in 2020, we said the cafes were dead, right? No one's going to go to stores anymore. And then look at us. There's at least 60 of us here all gathered in the same room today. But I think that the best use for AI from a customer service standpoint for our business right now is less about the customer interaction and more about the data, right? Using AI to help generate analysis of the data, to help us spot trends, to help us spot opportunities, customer interaction opportunities, or even product innovation opportunities that meet the customer's needs. All the best in the coffee industry, all the very best new drinks and everything that you see announced from whether it's Dunkin' or Starbucks or Badass Coffee, right? They're generated by requests, from the folks that are actually buying the product. So I think that there's a great opportunity for AI. I agree with Neil 1,000% that I do think that we're going to come back. It's going to swing back just like we did with the days of the cafe are dead. People still want to gather. There's a lot to learn from people. I think AI is great for setting it up, but there's still I don't think this will happen, but I think that there is a risk that you forget about the human interaction. If you lean too hard into it and you depend too much into the data that you're getting, you're leaving the human element out. So
you all pretty much had the same answer, that it's still all about people, even if Al isn't a person.
Yeah, Al's not going to solve everything. I think anybody who's telling you it's so easy, right? If it's easy to do, it's not going to be effective. It doesn't differentiate your brand. Like having AI write your blogs or write your posts or write your social, the consumer, it doesn't resonate. They want real connection, vulnerability, whatever those emotions are, and AI is not going to do that. So it has a place to play, but who's to know totally over the next 3 years?
If you had to give one piece of advice to other franchisors on how to improve their customer experience strategy, what would you tell them?
my one piece of advice would be know who you are. First and foremost, know who you are. Get your brand buttoned up. Make sure it's clean. Make sure it's ownable, uniquely ownable to you and your brand alone. And then communicate that. Share that. Make sure that your product and your brand or your service promise lives up to that. And then model that. I think that the most important disconnect that tears brands apart is when there's not a clear alignment between the franchisor, franchisee, or even in corporate businesses, right? From what the folks in marketing say versus what's actually happening in the field or in the stores. So know who you are, make sure that that's lined up, make sure you're training, educating, modeling, reinforcing that. And I think that's the most important piece.
So I don't know if this answer is right or not, because we're not a large franchisor, so maybe it's going to be really tough if we have like 100 units or something. But from my perspective, you can't train a franchisee to give a shit. Either they're going to care about the customer or they're not, right? So my philosophy is find franchisees who actually care, and then what we do is we train them in their actual modeling and budgeting to have a line item just for gifts. And instead of us telling them, hey, for every customer, do X, Y, and Z, we just say, you have your leeway, here's the budget for it, so they know it's expected. And many times we find they make the right decision. They'll find that a customer has cancer and that's why they're ordering a cleaning service. They can make a decision themselves to send flowers, rather than us as the franchisor dictating what to do on a very personal basis. It's tough to do that at scale, I think. So for us, it's just letting franchisees do what they do best and making sure they know it's okay to spend the money, let's actually just add it to your budget.
Yeah, I mean, I think for franchisors, I mean, your customer is the franchisee. So, I mean, I think all the stuff that we talked about, making sure that the franchisees have great experience in dealing with you as, as the supplier. And then, yeah, that you do a good job vetting people who then buy into the vision of what the brand is going to do. And if that means we're going to, send flowers, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, that they're just as into it as you are. Like they should live, breathe, eat, sleep that culture, and then it'll be, you're not forcing them to do anything. They see it and they're coming up with ideas and then sharing that with others. I think there's a huge power of the community of franchisees sharing ideas. So for the ones I'm part of, a lot of those best ideas of how do we go above and beyond are franchisee to franchisee. So just having a great way to facilitate the communication between franchisees and a platform for them to specifically call out like what's working, I think is good. And then finally, I think it's just to keep it simple. I think there's too many questions and there's too many prompts. As I mentioned earlier, I think it can be overwhelming. So I'm always about keeping it simple. So.
Broken record, but I would say, look out into the future, see where you want your brand to be in a few years, and start laying the groundwork now. It's not going to be easy per se. Maybe, I was really inspired yesterday by David Barr's speech. It resonated. Sometimes I've heard him talk like for 6 years, almost saying the same thing, but not quite. Changes it every time, but that one resonated with me. And one of those things was making changes and leveling up now, and that's the same thing for your CX experience. Level it up now, put things in place. It may be challenging, but it'll pay dividends, and it will be much easier than if you were to wait. So that's my advice.
All right, we have time for questions if anybody has any for our panelists.
Am I good? Hey, thank you guys for your time. My question, I guess for all of you, but Brian, maybe more specifically for you, since you mentioned the scale of reviews that you guys are going to have. So expectations are always changing for customers. Once you collect all of that feedback at scale, what systems do you have in place to then translate that into insights that are actionable, feasible, and viable at the organization level? And then how do you then ultimately roll out those service delivery enhancements to all your franchisees?
Sure. Yeah. So I know we use some sort of API to be able to connect to Google. So we have 33 sites at those. We're getting these 220 something reviews. So we have this software or whatever it is that aggregates all our reviews into a single spreadsheet. And so then we're able to track in real time how many we get. We also can read every review in a consolidated format. So that makes it really easy from just how do we consume what's there. And then it's just kind of more on our leadership team to go through and look for the common trends. And then are there easy wins that we can look for, or sometimes whatever there aren't. But I think that's it. We probably could do better, to be honest though, on it, using OWL and some other features to see what trends we can actually look for in it.
There's quite a bit of tools out there, right? None of them are sponsoring me, so if you want to, I'll tell you afterwards. But there's quite a few tools, and for us, we look at just if we're being driven off of the low ratings and digging into those and seeing what those specific low rating experiences were and trying to address issues off of that. That's the starting point anyway.
Yeah, that'd be the big red flags we start to see is if it's like rudeness, traits of someone being rude, or generally the red flag for us that if multiple people are saying that, we definitely have an issue with that person. that we need to address immediately because it's not going to solve itself.
It's funny how there's smoke, there's fire. Like you'll see poor reviews coming from a specific franchise. You'll get with the operations team, and they will be like, "Yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all, right?" And so, it's a little bit of a signal for the organization just based off what the consumer is saying.
Lindsay?
Hi guys, I'm Lindsay Simpson. I believe we learn from our mistakes. Do you guys have any big oops or failures you think your businesses have learned massively from?
Yeah. So the question was, do you have any like big oops or mistakes to learn? So I guess there's two sides of it. There's either like the corporate your own store or the franchisee, and I feel like the mistakes my franchisees are going to encounter are the same mistakes I made. So maybe it's the same answer. It was all around customer churn. I think we didn't track that well when we started, and our game, it's the cleaning business game. We do a lot of Airbnbs, we do a lot of residential, so all of it's around client retention. And if you don't track that like an insane amount, it's going to get away from you. So I think the big oops was waiting way too long to actually try to solve that problem with data. And when we actually looked at the data, we realized how many customers are leaving before the first 3 cleanings. And now then we could tell franchisees, send personalized Loom videos, send brownies, whatever you have to do, get them past the first 3. But I think the lack of attention to the data at the beginning, specifically around the main KPI for us, it's recurring revenue, that's where I messed up. And the hard part is, like, sometimes you're growing and you have leads coming in, and we never had a lead gen problem. So it gets masked. You're like, oh, we're growing. Like, this is sick. This is awesome. Then afterwards, you look at it and think, oh my God, we just lost this many customers. And I have a feeling our franchisees are going to feel the same thing. So my goal now is just to make sure they're looking at the data weekly, because that's what I messed up on for years.
Anybody else want to admit mistakes?
I mean, ours just on the Google side has just been consistency, where it was like, you get all excited, you make this big push, you get a bunch of reviews for a while, and then everybody totally forgets about it. And from all the things I've read, even from Google and SEO and all this ranking stuff, like what they want to see is you've got consistency, not these like giant peaks and valleys. And so for us, it's been how do we create consistent, performance there? And if not, it doesn't help us. So.
One thing, if I could add to that one, just because I've been harping on Google reviews too, like I just see night and day the data with SEO as well as Google reviews. So our incentive programs, which we teach franchisees, but we do internally, our techs get a bonus for every Google review. On top of that, our operations team gets bonuses if they get Google reviews. The way I think about Google reviews for my industry, 5-star Google review, I would happily pay $50. 5-star Google review with a photo and keywords in it, I'd happily pay $100. So if you think about that, a lot of our franchisees ask, well, do I give this customer a refund or how do I do it? And in my opinion is, well, if it's less than $100 and you want to maintain your reviews, do it. Just with the onset of everything happening with SEO, especially AI, the reviews matter a lot and the keywords matter a lot, and that's where we're putting all of our focus. So whatever Brian's doing, I 100% agree with.
We took an opposite approach. I don't know if I'd recommend this or not, but that we're the franchisee. It's a little different for the franchisor, but for our team, they lose a percentage of their bonus if they don't get 5 reviews a week. So loss aversion we found is much stronger than a gain.
I don't know if it was, I would classify it as an oops as much as it is we didn't get there fast enough. For us, and this kind of ties into the earlier question, what we found very quickly was that our franchisees, again, it has more to do with where this brand was when we acquired it. There hadn't been that sort of support, and there hadn't been that sort of training. And so when negative reviews were received, we didn't realize just how ill-equipped they really were to be able to handle that from a timing standpoint, from a language standpoint, from a compensation or whatever it is to make that right. And so I think for us, the real learning was when you're trying to build an infrastructure from scratch, everything is a priority. So how do you prioritize the priorities? And this was one that we missed, right? This should have been higher in our priority list of building the tools, creating scripts, creating trust, honestly, between the franchisor and the franchisee that we've got your back. We're monitoring all of this too. You're responsible for answering your own reviews, right? You don't know what was behind that review. We're selling coffee. We're not saving lives, for God's sakes, right? But you never know what's behind. Somebody had a really bad day, they started off their bad day, and we made that day worse for some reason, right? So for us, I think, again, it goes back to education and training, creating tools, creating a relationship, a trusting relationship with the franchisee that says, we're going to give you these tools, refer to these first, and if you're stuck or we don't see anything coming up, we're going to reach out to you and we're going to work on this together, and that gives you one more piece of context for the future. It's one you're going to put away in your book somewhere, and for us, every one of those interactions is amazing because we're constantly adding to that list of scenarios and possible answers and ways to mitigate what is your last transaction. You're only as good as your last transaction.
I haven't made any mistakes lately. Nothing that comes to mind, but as far as relevance to this group, I think where I have made mistakes is trying to do too much too fast. And so that's what keeps coming to my mind is be really strategic about what you're going to change and what you're going to implement, and make sure that it's thought all the way through. You can jam up a lot and distract everybody with a bad rolled out process or system, and it will deteriorate your CX indirectly, even if it's not related to it. It'll get everybody's calories focused on that versus focused on winning and owning the customer in the home. So that's what I think I've most recently made a mistake on.
All right, and I think this is going to be the last question.
So I own a restaurant, and culture and customer experience is such an important part of it, obviously. And we take a lot of pride in hiring a great staff that love each other, they're super charismatic, and it almost is a fault because they have such a tight-knit group. Whenever they work together, they kind of forget about the customers to an extent. Some do better than others. And I'm trying to figure out if there's better incentives for our staff to talk to customers and create relationships outside of just their coworkers. So I heard the Kinko's owner talk about profit sharing. I was thinking maybe Google reviews, a kickback for every 5-star Google review, get X amount of money for every employee that works over 10 hours. Is there anything that you guys would recommend to build the culture outside of just the employees themselves and more the community itself?
It doesn't scale very well. It's great for inside the restaurant, but killing any conversation that's negative about the customer. It's like life would be so easy if we didn't have customers to deal with, right? That sometimes can be a pervasive mentality, and it's cancerous. I've watched it over the last 6 years of my experience. We really hate our customers sometimes, and it's not the right approach, right? And so you got to crush it. You got to teach the team that that's not acceptable, it's not okay. That's what came to my mind when you were talking.
I know a restaurant brand that has review contests, and so they work with their customers and they say, if you leave a review and you mention me by name, then I'll get a bonus. And so the customer is excited to help assuming they had a great experience, and then your wait staff, is excited to do their best for the customer. Good?
All right, thank you guys. Round of applause for the panelists. So, thank you guys. So we have in 7 minutes the last